Seldom was our home without music. It was an eclectic mix. Mothers sang sad love songs. Falling in Love with Love, You Forgot to Remember, Deep Purple, while she cooked or dusted the furniture. Daddy practiced his violin, playing melodies with no words. On Saturday afternoon, the Metropolitan Opera of the Air, brought to you by Texaco at the sign of the Flying Red Horse, if you remember that, raise your hand, played on the radio.
Up until last week it was still.
Saturday night was the time to listen to Your Hit Parade, a half hour of the 10 most popular songs of the week. The same hit songs often remain popular for weeks, even months, moving up or down in their top 10 ratings, but affording ample opportunity to be heard. As a child, I learned songs which I can recall to this day. I listened to this radio program either with my mother or with my Aunt Mary, my father's youngest sister, who was our babysitter if my parents went out for the evening. My father was not at all interested in popular music. On Sunday evening at 6 o'clock, all activity halted while my family listened to a classical concert on the Ford Sunday Evening Hour, introduced by the initial theme from the fourth movement of the Brahms Symphony. When I was 4, my father began to take me on Saturday mornings to Orchestra Hall to hear the Detroit Symphony Orchestra children's concerts. Later, when I was in elementary school, I went to the concerts with my mother and little brother, along with my mother's friend Molly, whose daughter and son were the same ages as Dick and me. My present-day love of classical music was nurtured very early in life. From the time I was 4, I wanted to play the violin like Daddy. At 7, I finally had my wish granted. Our school had a music program that gave instruction during school hours. For this privilege, we were allowed to leave our regular classroom, making the experience doubly good. The age for beginning lessons was supposed to be 8, but because I was already in 3rd grade at 7, and probably because my father was charming and persuasive, I was allowed into the class. The first violin I played belonged to the school, but before long my father bought me one of my own, half the size of his. The teacher for the string instruments was Dorothy Romaine, a short, intense woman with very black hair, somewhat older than my mother. Mrs. Romaine taught me to read music, hold the bow correctly, and how to care for the violin. Her approach to teaching was very serious and all business. The string class was held in a room with straight-back chairs, music stands, and no desks. There was a blackboard, a lot of chalk dust, and a bare wooden floor. 2 cellists and 1 viola player were part of the group of would-be violinists. Each of us in the class took turns playing our lesson as a solo, with frequent corrections from Mrs. Romaine, and then we played together ensemble style. Mrs. Romaine was famous among the children because she tended to spit and spray when she spoke. After class, all of us checked with each other to find out who got it that day. My parents insisted that I practice the violin for an hour a day. Perhaps they began with a half hour when I was 7, but it soon increased. This was standard procedure when I was a child. Everyone I knew had to practice for an hour. My father told stories of being hit with his father's belt if he cut his hours short as a young boy. I was never punished, but I found many ways to stall during practice time. I want a drink of water. I'm hungry. I have to go to the bathroom. Could I go outside now and finish later? My parents held firm. I don't know if I had any talent for the violin. My father, not satisfied with Mrs. Romaine, decided to teach me himself. He had begun studying at the age of 5, studied all through college, and now played in a string quartet. He had been the esteemed music critic for the Detroit Free Press, reviewing all the major concerts and soloists who played in Detroit. Why would he hire a teacher? Unfortunately, my father was an utter perfectionist. He was continually retuning my instrument, readjusting the tension on the bow, informing me when a note was out of tune, telling me a better way to move my wrist and my bowing arm. I do not remember too much encouragement from him, mostly corrections. His comments were made with love mixed with impatience, but never with sarcasm or harshness. Nevertheless, I did not view myself as a very good player. On rare occasions, if the music in my book was written for student and teacher duets, he played along with me, something I loved and which he undoubtedly barely tolerated. There was one issue on which we disagreed when I was young, and with which I still disagree to this day. That was the question of letting me move ahead in my musical learning, even when what I was doing was not perfect. There were two instances of this: learning to play second and third positions and using vibrato. My father believed, did everybody know what that is? Do you understand? That until I could do first position perfectly, there was no point in teaching me either the note reading or fingering for second and third position, which involved higher octave and an alteration in position of the hand that held the violin. In his estimation, I was not yet ready for the more difficult music that used these notes. As a result, despite having played the violin for 6 years, from 3rd grade through 9th grade, I am musically illiterate when it comes to reading anything but the simplest pieces. When, as an adult, I considered taking up the violin again, I could not read the music I wanted to play, and my ability to learn and remember new notes had greatly diminished. Vibrato was a smaller issue, but came from the same reasoning. If I could not play the notes perfectly in tune all the time, then what was the use of learning to do vibrato? So you shake your hand. The immediate result of that omission was to be the only child in the Hutchins Intermediate School Orchestra who played a stringed instrument without vibrato, a source of some embarrassment to me. I was not the worst player, but close to it. When I entered high school, I was so intimidated by the excellent students in the music department at Cass Tech that I simply stopped playing. If my father did not love listening to me play the violin, which I understand, what young child can play without squeaking on the strings, I loved listening to him. He played either with a musical score or without, often improvising. He loved to play Fritz Kreisler sonatas, or to practice his part for the monthly string quartet, which was one of the joys of his life. One of the participants was a close friend of his, and the other two were members of the Detroit Symphony, until the symphony disbanded during the war, making them former members. My father sometimes played viola as well as violin parts. The quartet alternated houses each month, and I was ecstatic when it was our turn. When the quartet played at our house, our living room floor, which normally had not one item out of place, anyone who knows my father would know that, became strewn with instrument cases, men's jackets, and sheet music by Mozart, Schubert, and Brahms, dropped carelessly as the group went from one piece to another. I loved seeing that grown-ups could make a mess and no one said anything about it. My parents allowed me to stay up later than usual, right in the living room where the quartet was playing, as long as I was quiet. I curled up in the big armchair, watching the way the bow moved across the cello, enjoying the deeper tones of the viola, trying to hear my father's notes separately from the blend with others, enjoying how one of the groups stopped everyone in the middle of a line of music to say, "Let's go back to the start of this section. Something's off here." Mother loved music as well. She had studied piano since she was a young teen. Her aspirations were less formal than my father's. She played mainly for her own pleasure. I have no measure with which to assess her talent, but I do not recall my father ever criticizing her playing, and she seemed able to sight-read every piece she wanted to with no difficulties that I could discern. She preferred playing popular songs to the classics, had many piano books of traditional favorites, songs such as Coming Through the Rye and I'm Always Chasing Rainbows, and often brought sheet music of the latest popular hits. Together we sang the lyrics to Mersey Goats and Playmate, Come Out and Play With Me, and Chattanooga Choo Choo, and a few dozen other hits of the day. Just a half a page. The piano was an upright which was in the alcove off of the living room. Sometimes my father joined us playing the melody line on his violin. I enjoyed this time with my parents beyond all words, but towards the end of each session, I generally managed to spoil the mood. After several songs, my parents, especially my father, were ready to stop and move on to other activities, while I begged, "Just one more, can't we do just one more song?" Mother closed the piano book. Daddy wiped off his violin with a silk handkerchief. We loosened the tension on the bow and placed both in their case, saying, "That's enough now. We'll do this again another time if you behave." And Mother added firmly, "I think it's time for you to get ready for bed." I made a show of stalking off grumpily to my room, feeling the unfairness of a life where the grown-ups got to make all the decisions. But once in bed, and after my parents came in to kiss me goodnight, I fell asleep with words and melodies swirling happily inside my head.